Your host CJ Werleman, and this is episode number 10 of Foreign Object. By many measures, the year 2014 has been hellish. This year saw the bloody rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria, the escalation of conflict and violence in both countries, and last week alone, we saw the Pakistani Taliban carry out an unimaginably barbaric slaughter of 148 school kids. The day after, a deranged self-styled Iranian-born cleric murdered two civilians in a Sydney cafe, one of the deceased being a nephew of my parents' friends. Again, like every year since September 11, the attacks of September 11 in 2001, the religion of 1.6 billion Muslims, a quarter of humanity, is under ever closer scrutiny. Moderate Muslims are called upon yet again to denounce these attacks, ignoring the fact that some 40-odd Muslim groups and organisations in Australia denounced the Sydney siege as against Islam. And even the Afghanistan Taliban, the original OGs, the original Taliban homeboys, denounced the Peshawar attack as un-Islamic. By now, many of us are all too familiar with the double standard. The Western media doesn't call upon moderate Christians or priests or even the Pope to denounce the KKK, abortion clinic bombers, or the Ugandan Lord's Resistance Army, and so on. And here's where it even gets more interesting. When moderate secular Muslims do actually denounce Islamic extremism, they're still attacked by Islamophobes, particularly new atheists, for being, quote, nominal Muslims, or in some cases, non-Muslim. In other words, new atheists are determined, no matter the intellectual cost, to equivocate all Muslims with the Taliban. My next guest is no stranger to this peculiar dynamic. Kashif Chaudhry is a Pakistani-American physician, journalist, registered first responder for the charity Humanity First, former chairman of the American Muslim Writers Guild, and recipient of the Presidential Service Award. On the day of the Peshawar attack, Kashif tweeted a comment that caught my eye. He wrote, and I quote, "The Taliban want to kill me because I speak out against apostasy, blasphemy laws, and violent jihad, yet new atheists define me by my would-be killers, the Taliban." Kashif, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, CJ. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, mate, of course. That's great to have you on here. So speak to me a little bit about that tweet. What prompted you to post that?
Well, so I'm not new to this phenomenon on social media. First of all, let me just briefly introduce myself.
Yeah.
My name, as you said, is Kashif. I'm a physician. I was raised in the Gambia, which is a country in West Africa. And then I went back to my home country, Pakistan, where for the first time I saw what persecution felt like. And that's because I belong to a Muslim community known as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We're one of the largest Muslim communities in the world. We are present in about 206 countries worldwide. But in many Muslim countries, we're persecuted for our beliefs. And in Pakistan, we're outlawed by the government. And when I left Pakistan for the United States for higher medical education to pursue cardiology as my career choice, I started speaking up because I couldn't do this in Pakistan. I started speaking up against persecution, not only against the Ahmadis, but persecution of atheists, persecution of Christians, and for universal freedom of conscience in every sense of that phrase. And in doing so, I actually partnered with a lot of people, which include Christians, Jews, Muslims, fellow Muslims from other sects within Islam, and also from atheists. But what I noticed was, as I fought against these rabid views that actually punished a lot of Muslims in the Muslim world, which include, views on apostasy laws and blasphemy laws, views on violent jihad, on suppression of freedom of conscience, I noticed that I wasn't getting the most resistance from these Talibani people. Actually, I was ironically getting a lot of opposition from new atheists. It was very surprising because at that point I didn't know about the existence of new atheism, and then I was under a lot of attack on my social media pages and on Facebook and Twitter. The moment I tweeted or said something against apostasy laws, which was meant to be against or in opposition to the Taliban and all those mullahs in the Muslim world who actually support their view on religion or on different ideologies, I got attacked by new atheists saying, "Oh, apostasy laws are Islamic. You have to admit it. Blasphemy laws are Islamic. You have to admit it." Same thing happened when it's a recurring theme which happens every time there's a violent attack by any extremist Muslim group. But this time it was kids, and I was really, it was very insensitive, and it was very callous actually that I was tweeting in opposition or in condemnation of the Taliban killing children in Peshawar. And instead of joining me in attacking these oppressors, instead of joining me in attacking these killers, they were attacking me for condemning them and convincing me or insisting that I should admit their acts were Islamic and admit that these laws were apostasy laws and violent jihad was Islamic. And it's frustrating, but it's kind of amusing how the actual crime doesn't affect them as much as condemnation of the act does.
Indeed. Now, this is what I don't understand. What do new atheists want from you? I mean, you've been vocal in your repudiation of apostasy and blasphemy and all the really shitty interpretations of Islam. So right. What more do they want from you?
See, here's the thing, CJ. I think many people, even on my social media walls, do not understand the difference between atheism and new atheism. I mean, atheism is, someone like you, someone like Kyle Jones, whom I run the page Ahmadis and Atheists for Freedom of Conscience on Facebook. I mean, atheists are people who do not believe in God, and that is fine. But new atheists is a movement, quote unquote, a religion, I would say, where the drive is eradication of religion and the belief that somehow opposition of religion or eradication of religion would lead to, would save the world or would lead to world peace magically somehow. So if someone is inherently opposed to religion, and if someone wants to portray religion in the bad light, of course, ISIS or Taliban or Boko Haram or any other extremist group being seen as representative of religion would benefit that worldview or that cause. If I come in, I'm a guy who believes in no apostasy laws, no blasphemy laws, no violent jihad, separation of church and state, universal freedom of conscience, and secular governance. So if I, with all these beliefs, proclaim to be religious, then I'm a threat to that cause. I'm a threat to that worldview which wants to see religion in a bad light because I am good. And if they admit that I am a good Muslim, they have to admit that good religion exists.
Exactly.
But their cause and their drive is all religion is evil, all religion is bad. It has to go for world peace and to save the world. So I think that's the drive which causes them to attack me and not my killers.
Indeed, and that there's absolutely the new atheists don't understand. The irony is lost on them how tribalistic and anti-intellectual they really have become. I mean, when Chris Hedges debated Sam Harris, he had never heard of the new atheist movement, and after the debate, he said that was my first mistake not to know about these guys because they have to paint religion in its worst kind, in its worst form, in the form of religion that we all hate, and that's why you read Harris's book or Dawkins or Hitchens, when they get to someone like the Reverend Martin Luther King, they'll use the same argument that Christian fundamentalists or the Christian right will use. They'll say, oh, he really wasn't a Christian. And, well, that's what the new atheists will say as well. And both Harris and Dawkins say in the book that he was motivated by a sense of humanity when quite clearly he was a reverend. There was the prefix to his name and he was motivated by the social gospel. But any acceptance that somebody could be motivated by good then totally discolors their distorted worldview that religion is indeed the root of all evil and so forth. And you might have seen this debate, and I thought it was so illuminating just how anti-intellectual and how hollow the new atheist creed is in his debate I saw between Richard Dawkins and Mehdi Hasan. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that?
I think I saw part of that.
Yeah, and Mehdi Hasan, I mean, he's a Muslim, he's a brilliant individual, and well, first of all, Dawkins refused to debate Mehdi Hasan. I think he knew. I know. He would have been towed by him, but so he agreed to an interview. and Mehdi Hasan says, so you believe religion really is the root of all, most of the world, or all of the world's violence and troubles. And now Dawkins said, well, okay, not all of it, but most of it. And then Mehdi Hassan rattled off and said, so World War One religion? No. World War Two religion? Korea, Vietnam,
Exactly.
you name it. And then Dawkins, after, being stumped on that, Dawkins retreats to this infantile response, which was what New Wave will say. And then he attacked Mehdi Hassan for believing that Muhammad flew to heaven
I know,
on a winged
yeah.
horse. So,
Exactly, and CJ, this is what I experience when I talk to new atheists as well. For example, let me give you another example. Just it's equally hilarious. So there's this friend of mine, but also founder of global secular humanist movement, Faisal Saeed.
yep.
And so it's funny. Similarly, we were having a debate on apostasy laws, and just before talking to him about this, I had a debate on Huffington Post, which is on there's a whole article on Huffington Post on that debate between me and Ali Amjad Rizvi, who's also a new atheist blogger. Mm-hmm. And in that blog, I actually took on Ali Rizvi and proved that there was nothing in the Quran whatsoever that supported the notion of apostasy laws. And so when I debated or tried to debate Faisal on that, his response was, "Oh, let's draw cartoons instead. Do you want to challenge me?" So I mean, it's hilarious. It's the same as Dawkins asking Mehdi Hassan about belief on winged horses and stuff like that. It's a way to divert the topic so that you don't have to intellectually answer to an intellectual argument.
No, you don't, and they reduce the argument by deflecting. By they can't concede that all of the greatest amounts of bloodshed have been spilled in the name of secular Western civilization, and not
right.
The Muslim world has a lot of catching up to do if it wants to meet the body count of Western secular governments. But you've got to pretend that doesn't happen, and this is why all fundamentalism is fundamentalism, and it doesn't matter. Nazism, fascism, Islamic fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, and even atheist fundamentalism, and is dogmatism that doesn't believe. It's a belief that nothing else needs to. Well, the other doesn't need to be investigated. It's a very egocentric belief that other people don't need to be investigated, and also they don't investigate or question the imperial projects or the wars or the atrocities carried out in their own name.
That's right.
It's always the demonization of the other and a lack of willingness or an unwillingness to investigate their own.
That's right. That's very right. And actually, if you look at, most people don't realize this, but if you examine 9/11 or if you examine most of the atrocities in the world, what were the demands of the 17 Saudi hijackers in 9/11? They didn't want Islam to dominate the United States. They wanted U.S. to get out of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I don't know how much more Osama bin Laden could have made that clearer.
Right.
I mean, in audio tape after audio tape,
exactly.
He wanted the U.S. to stop pillaging, Saudi Arabia's natural resources, the oil, and the theft of our oil.
Exactly, and the same is true for Anwar al-Awlaki as well. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure you're aware, but he was one of those who condemned 9/11. And, he condemned atrocities in the name of religion. But the reason why he got radicalized, in his own words, was because of, quote unquote, the geopolitical situation in Yemen and in almost all the Muslim world, including Iraq.
I've written extensively about Awlaki, and you're exactly right. I mean, there's nothing in his theological background to suggest to indicate a radical transformation from a moderate Muslim into a terrorist. And he even spoke at the Pentagon at a lunch and was considered a moderate Muslim voice, an important moderate Muslim voice in America. But he stated quite clearly he was concerned about the drones, the bombing of Muslims, the killing of Muslim civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's what purely... And they all say the same thing. The Boston bombers said, Iraq and Afghanistan. The London bombers said, quote, there's nothing, religion had nothing to do with this. We were showing YouTube videos of American military atrocities in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's why we had to do this. But that takes self-examination, and which is what fundamentalists are unwilling to do.
Yeah, actually, that's one thing that's very common between all fundamentalists. If you notice, the Pakistani mullahs whom I started my online fight, with, and the fundamentalists who are now called neo-atheists, there are many similarities. For example, they're not ready to be swayed by any new data, any new studies, geopolitical realities, any new information. They're just very rigid, very stubborn, very childish. And they both see each other as the absolute evil. So, for example, Pakistani mullahs would see atheism as absolutely evil that needs to be eradicated to save the world. New atheists, on the other hand, see religion as the absolute evil that needs to be eradicated to save the world. And then both these groups are also very intellectually dishonest because they portray the most extreme and most vile people in each other's groups as representative of their faith. And this is very dangerous. And this bigotry leads to violence eventually. And I've argued this in my blog on quote unquote Talibani atheism, which is a term that I use for very vile neo atheists. That's for people like Sam Harris, for instance. He considers me a quote-unquote nominal Muslim. There are many other new atheists. Ali Amjad Rizvi is actually one who considers me quote-unquote a bad Muslim. And there are some new atheists who actually outrightly consider me a non-Muslim for just being an Ahmadi Muslim affiliated with the Ahmadiyya Muslim reformist sect. Now, this is a very bigoted approach, because if moderates, and it's not just Ahmadi Muslims, but other moderates as well, if moderates / reformists are nominal Muslims, and ISIS and Osama bin Laden and Baghdadi are true Muslims, then that means that they represent the faith of 1.8 billion people. And if they represent the faith of 1.8 billion people, why would I not look at my Muslim neighbor with suspicion and with the fear? Why not? If Al Qaeda or if ISIS is the real face of Islam, then I should look at my Muslim neighbor with suspicion, with fear. This is what leads to Islamophobia. This irrational fear is what translates into anti-Muslim hate crimes and animus. And this is why we're seeing polls, showing just that. There's more suspicion of Muslims in the West. There's more fear of Muslims in the West, and there's a spike in hate crimes as well.
And a lot of people are also too unfamiliar with the idea that Islamophobia is an industry. It's not just a bigoted view.
That's right.
It's actually it's an industry driven by the pro-Israeli lobby, neoconservative movement, the military-industrial complex.
That's right.
Because these groups profit specifically from disseminating fear into the public place.
Right. That's very right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so new atheists pride themselves on intellectual reasoning and critical thinking and empirical evidence, but they will not examine any idea which is contrary to their worldview that religion is the root of all evil. I mean, you said that earlier, and I like the fact that you called new atheists I think one of your blogs, the mullahs of atheists.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, they are the mullahs of the atheist world. I mean, here's the thing. I've never denied the fact, CJ, that there are mullahs in the Muslim world. I've never denied the fact that terrorism or extremism is a problem. I mean, there are mullahs who believe in violent jihad. There are mullahs who actually do believe in apostasy laws. There are mullahs who actually do believe in blasphemy laws. There are mullahs who believe in political Islam and that it should be enforced on people. The fact is, we the moderates, we the reformists condemn such attitudes. We condemn this ideology. We explicitly speak against it day and night. And that's how I actually started my social media activism. But the thing is, if someone is honest in asking for a reform of the Muslim world, I fail to understand why they would not hug us and embrace us and welcome us. This reform is right here, standing right here. But instead of, it's very hypocritical, and there's so much double standards that you're asking for this very reform, which you're fighting when you see it. So the other day I was talking to Faisal, and he was saying that the Muslim world is in need of reform, and I said, okay, no apostasy laws, no blasphemy laws, secular governance, condemnation of violent jihad. What more do you need?
Yeah.
He said, yeah, that's the reform the Muslim world needs. And I said yes. So why do you have a problem with Ahmadi Muslims like me who actually speak about this reform. And he said, oh, no, you are just a persecuted minority in the tens of millions. So, so I mean, reform always starts with a drop of rain, right? Rain starts with a drop. Every reform is going to start with, of course, one man. And we're talking about tens of millions of people. And it's not just the Ahmadi Muslims. There are many moderate Sunni Muslims. The majority of the Muslim world, the vast majority, over 99% of the Muslims in the world, are peaceful people who actually decry all this nonsense. So, it's very frustrating, but it's very hypocritical, and people need to understand this. That these new atheists, they pretend to be rational intellectuals, but they're actually very hypocritical because what they're asking for is what they're actually rejecting. They're asking for reform, but then they want ISIS to be seen as the representative of religion, as the face of Islam in the world. And people like us are sidelined, are belittled, are condemned as bad Muslims, nominal Muslims. I don't understand. It's very, very hypocritical.
Well, speaking as a reformed new atheist myself, I can tell you that they're not interested in the reformation of religions. They're only interested in the eradication of religion.
Actually, that's very interesting because their reform is actually eradication. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. Any effort, and that's why you're outlining that debate with Faisal. That's they want eradication, and it's that utopian thinking, which is what makes new atheists so dangerous. And that's why new atheists or atheist fundamentalists share in common with Islamic and Christian fundamentalists is they believe they're on a mission to eradicate the world of evil. And history has shown time and time again, when you come from that mindset, that inevitably it moves very quickly. It's a very short step from wanting to eradicate a belief to eradicating the person who holds that belief. And the Soviet Union and Albania in the 20th century prove that. Now, all these atheist fundamentalists have all these nuanced arguments how the Soviet Union wasn't atheistic in nature. That they weren't, but they were anti-theistic, which is what new atheism is.
That's right.
And they tried to eradicate religion through propaganda and anti-religious propaganda, and when that didn't work, then it turned violent. And I want to speak and just come to the hypocrisy a little bit and to show how anti-intellectual it is. I mean, I've spoken at a lot of new atheist events. I've attended a lot of new atheist events, and it's very anti-intellectual. It's an echo chamber. They listen to the same podcasts, the same speakers. They read the same books. And when you go to these conferences and conventions, it's very white. It's very upwardly middle class, and the lectures and the speakers. I mean, my God, they go on. You may as well go to a Christian fundamentalist sermon, and because there'll be at a Christian fundamentalist convention, there'll be a 1 hour, a lecture on how to win an argument with your atheist friend. You go to an atheist fundamental convention, how to win an argument with your theist friend. I mean, they're two sides of the same coin. Now, it's interesting that these very anti-homophobic former Muslims, and now the phrase Uncle Tom is a horrible phrase to use, but how many new atheist conventions are you invited to speak to? I mean, none.
Zero.
Now, but they will trot out Ayaan Hirsi Ali over and over again, who's a former Somali Muslim, as you know. I know you've written about her before. She's a former Dutch parliamentarian.
Right.
Now, she has called for a military war against Islam, and she's paraded out constantly at these new atheist conventions. But you're not. The moderate voices who call for reformation of the religion rather than eradication aren't. So yes. That's right. So speak to that a little bit. Speak, that dynamic.
So see, the thing is, I've written about Hirsi Ali at least on two different forums, one including Huffington Post, and this was after there was an uproar and she was disinvited, so to say, from Brandeis University. But Hirsi Ali says that Islam, as a whole, Islam should be crushed, including militarily. Now, the thing is, she was asked in this interview to kind of clarify her statement and whether she meant radical Islam or Islam as a whole. And she said, there is no radical Islam or moderate Islam. Islam is Islam. So how do you crush Islam? For example, I've argued with new atheists, and I've given my own example. I'm a Muslim. I believe in Islam. I profess Islam, and I'm very proud of it. How do you crush the Islam in me? I don't understand. How do you militarily crush my Islam without killing me somehow? So it's very bigoted to make such statements, about a whole faith of 1.8 billion people. And the same when she went to give a speech at Yale, she said the same thing. She said that the civilized world, and Sam Harris actually makes this false dichotomy as well between quote unquote the civilized world and the Muslim world. But she said we are at war with people who believe in the Quran completely, and I do. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the Quran completely. I think it's very bigoted to to create this fear amongst Western audiences for people who believe in the Quran or people who follow the Quran, because that's completely false. I'm very proud of being a Muslim. I follow the Quran completely, and it's that inspiration that inspires me to do a lot for humanity. I'm sure you're aware of the humanitarian work that my community does. We do, numerous blood drives. We do a lot of food campaigns. We run a lot of humanitarian work in third world countries, including, mostly in Africa, where we have lots of secular schools and hospitals for humanity. We attend to disaster relief and everything. Now, if I'm seen as a quote unquote a person who Hirsi Ali is at war with, or whom America should feel threatened by, I mean, that's very unfortunate. That's very bigoted. So I think I think if Hirsi Ali or Sam Harris or any other new atheist limits their criticism or limits their attack to people who exploit the Quran for bad, for evil, then we're on the same side.
Yeah.
We're on the same side. This is exactly what I do day in and day out, and we have the same common enemy. But the fact that that's not the case, and she's actually, or all new atheists are actually just attacking religion blindly, is very unfortunate, and it's very frustrating.
You rightfully point out in that piece that imagine if somebody said, Judaism should be militarily crushed. Can you imagine the public outcry?
Exactly. Yeah. Or actually, that's very interesting. I did a social media experiment, which I love to do, by the way. So I put a Facebook status saying atheism should be militarily crushed, and it was awesome. I mean, the responses were great. I mean, it was just an outrage, like. People saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were so bigoted. I didn't know you were such a narrow-minded." Just insert some bleeps here, but it was very funny, the type of outrage there was, and then most of this was, of course, from atheist friends. And then when I said this was just an experiment, I actually quoted that experiment in the original Huffington Post article as well. So it was interesting when I turned the tables. I was certainly a bigot, but then these were the same people who were defending Hirsi Ali for the same statement when it came to Muslims. It was really interesting.
No, that is interesting. What do you say to people who are atheists who say, when they do make a comment like that, they go, oh, but when they're called out for racism or bigotry,
yeah.
And they always hide behind, oh, well, Islam isn't a race. What do you say to that?
That's very interesting. I see racism is a form of bigotry, and there are many forms of bigotry. So discrimination or irrational phobia of anyone based on, it can be based on anything. It can be based on race, it can be based on gender, it can be based on color, it can be based on religion as well. As such, Islamophobia / anti-Semitism are forms of bigotry which are equivalent to racism. So they're not strictly quote-unquote racism, but when someone like Ben Affleck says it's gross and racist of Harris to lump 1.8 billion Muslims under one large group, what he means is not they're racist. It's just a matter of semantics. It doesn't mean racist because Islam is a race, but that it's an equivalent of racism in terms of bigotry.
Yeah, indeed. There's a great book that's called Race and Arab Americans Before and After 9/11. And, it's basically a book filled with essays and it shows, the whole idea of race is a man-made construct anyway. And, it says, that Arabs in particular, were at the door of whiteness in America pre 9/11, but 9/11 took away their white card.
Right.
And that, so I think Dean Obadiah, the comedian.
Oh, yeah,
and he's also, writer for the Daily Beast.
Right.
I mean, he's written very eloquently on that as well, and he joked. Him and I have some great banter offline, and he said, it's so weird. Before 9/11, I'm just a white guy living a typical white guy's life. All of my friends had names like Monica, Chandler, Joey, and Ross. I go to bed September 10th white, wake up September 11th, I'm an Arab.
I actually read that. That was awesome.
And this is what troubles me is this Islamophobic. And
Right.
it is a thing. Islamophobia is the new anti-Semitism. There's no way arguing it. It isn't, and it's leading to the loss of civil liberties and hate crimes, and is justifying the imperialist impulse.
Right, right. And talking of civil liberties, I mean, Ayaan Hirsi Ali has actually asked for curtailment of these liberties directly when she said Muslim schools should be closed. I mean, can she say the same thing for Jewish schools?
Oh my God.
Can she say the same thing for Catholic schools? I mean, that's crazy to suggest that Muslim schools should be closed down in America because they are quote unquote the houses of terror. That's really crazy for her to say that. And also Sam Harris, where he says that torture against convicts is quite ethical, and he argues for profiling against Muslims or whoever quote unquote looks like Muslim. I don't know how you can say someone looks like Muslim, but that is bigotry. I mean, that is bigotry right there. Calling for profiling, calling for closing down of Muslim schools. I mean, this is where you enter the area where civil liberties are kind of affected.
Yeah, and you also end up inspiring someone like Anders Breivik to slaughter 73 people in Norway. I mean, you even point that out in his piece. He was inspired by Hasim Ali and all of us that very anti-Islamic type of writing. This is I speak about Sam Harris a lot. I've written about Sam Harris a lot, and even my listeners. I can see them rolling their eyes now that I mention him again. Every time I mention him, even people who do support me don't like it when I talk about Sam Harris. But he debated Chris Hedges, and New Atheists hate Chris Hedges. I mean, Chris Hedges, he's as critical of all types of religious fundamentalism. He wrote a book on Christian called Christian Fascists. Which looked at the explosion of the radical Christian theology in America. And he also, he debated, and after debating Sam Harris, he said, I started Sam Harris's book when it was published, but put it aside. His facile attack on a form of religious belief we all hate, his childish simplicity and ignorance of world affairs, as well as his demonization of Muslims, made the book tedious at best and often idiotic and racist. His assertion, for example, that the war in the former Yugoslavia was caused by religion was ridiculous. Now, Chris Hedges spent, he was embedded in Yugoslavia. He followed, he lived in Sarajevo for 4 months as the Serbs shelled that city. He has spent 10 years in the Middle East. He can speak Farsi. But
wow,
he understands the Middle East. But anything that he says is instantly dismissed by New Atheists. But they'll listen to Sam Harris, who I doubt who's even stepped foot in the Middle East. Maybe through a Dubai shopping mall on the way through, maybe on his way to Europe. But this is where fundamentalism comes into play. They'll believe. Hang on to anything that one of their own says.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And they'll hang on to someone like I say Ayaan Hirsi Ali when they call for that type of outrageous bigotry. And instead of listening to somebody who's actively trying to reform and put down the extreme interpretations of the Islamic faith.
That's exactly right. And coming to our previous point, what we alluded to is how New Atheists actually just change the subject and divert the whole thing. When I speak about, when I criticize Ayaan Hirsi Ali in any way, I mean to criticize her work. And New Atheism, and New Atheists should understand this, that New Atheism and their ideas are not above criticism. I have always said that Islam is not above criticism. Feel free to criticize Islam. And the knee-jerk reflex when I speak about Islamophobia is, oh my God, you're shutting no, please criticize Islam. And Islam is an idea which is not above criticism. But Islamophobia is a reality in itself. So when I criticize Ayan Hirsi Ali's ideas, the knee-jerk attack that I get back is, oh my God, you know that she underwent abuse and female genital mutilation. Of course she did, and it's very sad that she did. It's very unfortunate. And my colleague Qasim Rashid has actually written a detailed paper on female genital mutilation, and I've actually outcried, I actually decried that as well. But that is not a response to an intellectual criticism of her ideas, which I consider Islamophobic. So it's the same is true for Sam Harris. I'm sure you're aware that Sam Harris was against building a mosque near the Ground Zero area back in the day.
Yeah.
If you're standing for freedom of religion, if you're standing for rights of everyone, which is actually a liberal ideal, a secular ideal, then why would you oppose a mosque in New York, which was not exactly on Ground Zero, but near Ground Zero? And then I spoke about this, and then the knee-jerk reflex again I get is, oh my God, you support the Taliban? I mean, I don't understand. It's not even intellectual. It's just, it's very incoherent responses most of the times that I get from new atheists.
Well, I also too, I believe it's calculated as well. When I see someone like Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity,
Right.
They're not as stupid as the things that they say. They have a base that they know will react very positive to. Anything that's bigoted or very simplistic, and
right.
I believe the same of a lot of these guys. I want to believe that Harris is smarter than that. God, he's a genius. I mean, the guy's a genius. He's a neuroscientist. Sorry, but that doesn't mean he's. Like I look at Richard Dawkins, he's a absolutely brilliant evolutionary biologist, and I count myself a fan of him, but doesn't mean he's well qualified to comment on the Middle East or Islam, and he admits to never having read the Quran. And what drives me crazy is these guys, the number of times Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris have said, whoever's criticized me, they took me out of context. God, if I had 10 cents for every time Sarah Harris has said, that person took me out of context. But then they take the Quran, and they quote passages from the Quran, and it says, and the Quran commands death to the unbelievers and make hell a fiery home. But they don't put that in historical context. Muhammad, that was a specific command, a military order on the eve of a battle, is they're about to be attacked by the more military superior Meccans, and the unbelievers in that context is the Meccans. It's not all of us.
Exactly.
So there's a hypocrisy, and they just can't see it because they're fundamentalists, and fundamentalists can't see that kind of irony.
Right. And actually, I also put up a blog on that about how the Quran is taken out of context. And when you take Sam Harris out of context, there's just this outcry. So, for example, this was a debate I was watching between a new atheist and you a few weeks ago, where and this was Faisal again, where he said that there was a verse in the Quran which said that half of the Quran, the first half of the Quran, was actually not applicable anymore, and the second half supersedes that first half. So I saw that debate, and I spoke with him, and I told him to show me that verse, and lo and behold, there was no verse, and there was a verse which he said mullahs in the Muslim world, some mullahs in the Muslim world, interpreted to mean that the first half is not applicable anymore. I mean, show me one mullah who say, these are the same mullahs whom you say will kill you for blasphemy. These are the same mullahs who would kill you for saying one verse of the Quran is not true. And how ironic that these mullahs are now saying that half of the Quran is not applicable. So it's I don't know, but it's just dishonest to come up with these kind of arguments. Then the argument for instance that apostasy laws are present in the Quran. Even Sam Harris actually at one point said that they are not mentioned in the Quran. But other new atheists still kind of cling to that view that apostasy laws are present in the Quran. As much as you intellectually demolish them, they're just very, very, very stubborn in their view.
Oh, they reduce everything to slogans and bumper stickers, and
Right.
they'll say Islam commands them to take over the world and impose Sharia law all around the world. Yeah, well, really? Well, show me the book of Sharia law.
Exactly. There is no book of Sharia.
I know. No, it is crazy. But,
I know.
But mate, Kashif, this has been a fantastic conversation. Where can my listeners find more of your writings?
So my blog is kashifmd.com. And my Twitter handle is also KashifMD, so they can follow me on Twitter or they can follow my blog.
Yep, mate, fantastic. And mate, enlightening conversation. I follow you on Twitter. Like all of my guests, when I try to get important voices on here, you are a very important voice. And the world isn't black and white. And the world isn't. We should never have a binary worldview where we divide the world up into good versus evil. And
Right.
Hedges talks about that himself. The problem a lot of these new atheists have, like other fundamentalists, is they externalize evil, and the fault, dear Brutus, is within ourselves rather than our stars, is what William Shakespeare said. So, so Kashif, mate, thanks, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
CJ, thank you so much for having me. And just one last word before I end this and say goodbye. I invite all atheists, new atheists, all theists, all people of all faiths or no faith to join us, in the fight for universal freedom of conscience. As you know, I also co-run a Facebook group with fellow atheist, Kyle Jones. And, this is a common human cause above all religion, above all divides and everything. I would use this forum to invite everyone of all faiths and no faith to join us in this fight.
Absolutely, mate. Well said. Good on you. Nice
Thank you so much.
All the best.
Thank you so much. Take care.